Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. This time, Deep Space Nine, If Wishes Were Horses. Yeah, we've been complaining about these generic titles. This one, it's at least it's long. If Wishes Were Horses on DS9. You know what? If Wishes Were Horses, we would need a Patreon. We would be loaded with cash to provide you with so much bonus content. But we're not. But you don't have to be loaded with cash. Become a Patreon member. Patreon.com/IBD. Support the whole network. Support the mothership. It's All Been Done Radio Hour. Support us. It's all been tricked before. And if wishes were horses, wait, if wishes were horses, that's this. If wishes were horses, it's all been tricked before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Stephen.
It is Keith. I've returned somehow.
That was last week.
I was just in a cave.
That was last week. This is Jimmy Jerome. And Keith, if wishes were horses, you'd stop. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you've called our shot like last week. You knew we were going to be right back here somehow.
I did. So, first impressions on If Wishes Were Horses.
If wishes were horses, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Is that how it finishes?
I mean, I always heard the phrase, if and buts were candy and nuts, we'd have Christmas every day. But if wishes were horses, I'm less familiar with that phrase.
Then dreamers would rise.
Yeah, there is.
Is that really how it ends?
I think so.
Interesting. I liked some of the resolution of it eventually.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of it is you just really kind of had to sit back and go for the ride, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I usually like the scientific and mystery ones, as I've said before.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't feel like the investigation was going about the way something wasn't clicking. I'm not sure what that is yet. I guess we'll figure that out.
Yeah, I think and we'll get deeper into this probably, but we've seen this Star Trek episode before. So I think to your point, Keith, I think I tried to just relax and go with the journey rather than the destination. Although the destination ended up being satisfying,
mm-hmm.
and in parts of the journey, I for sure did not love it. So.
Yeah, this was a bad episode. Just there were a handful of redeeming things in it, but overall it was a bad episode. Hated two of the three spirits, essentially. Well, hate's a strong word. Hated one of them. A second one really didn't age well, and the third one was fine.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Well, I'm curious to see if how I think you're assigning those are the same as mine.
Oh, the horrible one was Buck, the baseball player. The one that didn't age well was obviously Rumpelstiltskin, and the one that was fine was Dax. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, none of those were correct. None of those were correct. I think you'd be able to figure out pretty quickly. Rumpelstiltskin was the terrible one. Yeah. Dax was the one that didn't age well, and the baseball one was fine.
Yeah, I thought Dax looked pretty young.
Yeah, she did.
She still looks pretty young.
Yes.
So at the beginning, we've got Odo loitering in Quark's bar, which is great because, he's just not even gonna go anywhere. He's criticizing that Quark's letting Jake use the holosuite because they're supposed to be for adults only, but I guess Quark is adding some family entertainment. So this confirms a lot of we know on the Enterprise families get to use the holodeck, but we all knew that Quark's was just used for sex, right? And even on the Enterprise, like a lot of people hypothesize that some of the crew are using it for sex. So,
I mean, ultimately, Deep Space Nine's a truck stop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the original lot lizards.
They'll give us that great exchange of Odo saying,
but they're lot lizards.
Odo saying, "You're disgusting," and Quark saying, "It's a living."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is not quite the Flintstones way, though, unfortunately.
That's what I was thinking.
I had the same thought.
Yeah, when you said it, that didn't occur to me.
It's a living. But we could then go to Bashir and Dax having dinner. And apparently, he's still obsessed with her. I think this is kind of the end of the terrible womanizing Bashir arc. Thank God. Because he has the wherewithal to actually be ashamed of it when it blows up in his face and comes in front of everybody.
I thought the way they present that is very, very good. It's not the right term, but very much like, essentially they're saying, you're into her because you can't have her. Because then she's just naming like all these other girls he's been with. Yeah. And it's like, how am I different? And I guess in a way we find out that she is different, but in the sense that eventually he's like, oh man, yeah, that was terrible. So yeah, I related too much to Bashir there, and maybe that's why I recognized like, yeah, that's terrible. But
yeah, I'm glad to see the end of that Bashir. I think that's
sure.
the end of that Bashir. We'll see for sure, but later. But
as we go on, exposing that like none of that was sincere. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean I forgot that they're both lieutenants, but he's a junior grade lieutenant, so he kept having to call her sir, which adds to the power imbalance there and everything. I mean, I like the way she handles it. She's so cool. Just like, go take a high-pitched sonic shower. And he's like, I did. It hasn't worked.
That's a cold shower in the future, right?
But but she's somewhat understanding. I mean, she talks about how she used to be a young man, so she knows the feelings and the hormones, and that gives her a little more tolerance than a lot of women that have in that situation. But at the same time, like the fact that she has to put up with it in this is disappointing, because we know even just 30 years after this episode aired, where we've seen a lot of movement towards women saying, I'm not putting up with it anymore.
Well, I mean, how was the body she was put in dressed is really the question I need to ask.
The uniform.
Oh, well, you're standard.
It was just the standard uniform. Yeah. I appreciated that. It wasn't a Barclay fantasy where she came out in something disgusting. And I think that helps Bashir be redeemable down the road.
Yes.
When we see that, yes, he makes her a little more submissive in her words.
Yes.
Or whatever, but she's not a bimbo. She's not as smart as the real Dax, but you have to wonder, like, is that because Bashir doesn't know the stuff that the real Dax would know? Or
probably.
Yeah, so I don't know. And I did appreciate that he wasn't taking advantage of it when she first appears to him. Like, he clearly is like, something's wrong. We're stopping this. I know I'm the butt of the joke. He did eventually stop fighting it when she told him to, and that's believable, but I appreciated he at least tried not to. And then once he realized what was going on, he did fight it and did not take advantage.
Definitely made me think, like, that he realized he didn't really have real consent.
Yes.
And although I thought
for all his faults, he actually wants consent, thank God.
I think later they hint towards, though, they did hook up, which is different from what was going on right there. So
okay.
I did not get that.
I'll look into the text, the sacred text. I think Bashir would rather that Jadzia actually likes him, not because of some weird other thing that's going on as well.
Right.
I think I think all those levels are going on here.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
I appreciated that.
Absolutely. Basically, before we even discover that Dax is fake, which I figured out right away, not remembering that, but just the way she was acting. But O'Brien, because we'd already seen other appearances before we saw that. So O'Brien's reading Rumpelstiltskin to Molly. I did see that apparently this script was written with it being a leprechaun. Yeah. And Cole Meany said, that's super racist. I'm not doing that. You change that now. Every Irish actor tries to escape that stereotype. I'm not doing it. So they had to like pour through mythology and stuff to try to find a suitable replacement. And they said it did cause problems with the rewriting of the script, that they couldn't use a leprechaun, but they thought Rumpelstiltskin was similar enough. It worked.
Yeah.
And this was right around the time the Leprechaun movie came out. With Jennifer Aniston and, of course, our friend from every Star Wars movie, Warwick Davis, as the aforementioned the Leprechaun, which I'm doing the Wayne's World.
I mean, here we are, like 40 years later, and I did not realize it was such an or 30 years later, I didn't realize it was such an offensive stereotype. I was like, really? They have okay, that's fair. I just did not realize. So we need to do more with making people aware that leprechauns are offensive stereotypes. Oh, we've got one in Radio Hour. Didn't even think about it.
I think it's really about certain contexts, but we'll see. I mean,
I think you're. Yeah.
Honestly, it's. I can. In other words, I can believe that he might have personally found it offensive, and I think if it's presented in certain ways, certainly yes.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. But
yeah, to say that every appearance of a leprechaun under any circumstances is racist across the board.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. So then we get Cisco at his quarters, and I really appreciated the way he was reading, like all the way back, because I could never see like Kirk or Picard or any other officer in the earlier shows sitting like that. I liked it.
It was a weird piece of furniture for him to lean back like that.
It's like that he was fully comfortable with himself in his own quarters.
Kirk would do that if there was a lady, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Different circumstances. But,
yes.
So we meet this baseball player that you've never heard of because he exists in our future, Star Trek's past, which we got another one of those. Buck Bokai, played by Keon Young, who's best known for Men in Black 3, Crank, Samurai Jack, and Crank High Voltage. 261 credits, a lot of voice acting.
You guys,
Full Alchemist, Full Metal Alchemist, Samurai Rabbit, Grace and Frankie.
You guys might recall we've discussed Mr. Young before on this podcast.
We have
a little movie called "Dude, Where's My Car?"
Huh.
Did not.
He is the tailor in that. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did not realize that.
He's born in Hawaii. I think his dad was Chinese and his mom was Japanese.
He will be back in another episode of Star Trek Enterprise. He plays the Hoshi Sato's father. Hoshi is one of the main characters of Enterprise.
Oh, okay.
So he plays the lead character's father in Enterprise. But just these 2 episodes, I feel like we hear about that character again, the Buck Bokai, in the future, because that's the era of baseball Sisko's most familiar with, the end of baseball. Because he played in the last World Series ever, which is probably depressing to Steven, but that you may live to see the last World Series.
Yeah, as long as the Mets beat them, then I'm okay with it.
Did they beat them?
Me a lot of. I know you guys have talked about this. One, I enjoy at the beginning. They said Zach has his baseball mitten.
Yes, Quark said that because Quark doesn't know.
Oh,
Jake. Yeah,
Jake. Sorry, and then I thought that talk about the end of baseball and everything was very. I think I've talked about Brockmire on here before. Maybe it was off mic, but that series ended in the future, kind of like Parks and Rec and a couple other shows in the very near future. I think like 2030 or something like that. Very dystopian, but they were pretty much like, yeah.
Well, they said the last World Series is in 2042, which is only 20 years in our future, so you could very well still be alive. Jeez. What confused me is they mentioned that there were only 300 people at the last World Series. If baseball had gotten that unpopular, how is it still around? 300 at the biggest game of the year? It would have been dead years before that.
Well, I thought that was Sisko's impression in his mind was like, there could have only been, because then he said 301. But.
No, I think that was the actual, it may have been 315 or 296, but I think the actual thing was it was only about 300 people.
Yeah, that
could have been exaggerating, but I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's a better way to handle it.
Yeah. So jumping back, they arrive in Ops, and we realize there's a second Dax, which is fun, and it's fun slightly. It frequently is uncomfortable, but we do realize they're not holograms. Which my first thought was Quark was talking about the holodeck, and I'm pretty sure there's an episode or a novel where his holodeck. Like there's something leaking from the holodeck, so then the holograms start being on the stations. That's what I thought it was at first, but
I wrote it's just a holodeck issue. Yep.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, just to go back. So this is ambiguous. This is where I got, I think, from Dax 2, as she is listed in this transcript.
Okay. So Dax also played by the lovely Terry Farrell, who did a great job doing the dual roles.
Yeah, give me 2 Terry Farrells and we're having fun.
Yeah, she said she had a lot of fun filming this episode, so.
Dax 2 says, come on, Lieutenant, stop denying all those yearnings you feel. Dax 1 says yearnings, and Dax 2 says, if you don't, you'll never know what you miss. And you could take that either way. It could be, I know what you're missing, or it could just be like, I'm giving you general life advice.
Oh, see, I thought it was general. I didn't take that as...
I can see that on second reading. So.
I do think, it's... So Terry Farrell said she really had fun filming the dual role. Sitting Alfadal, Alexander Sitting now, said he did not enjoy it. He found it difficult to act with somebody like licking his ear, which I appreciate. I thought that was pretty fun. I liked that. Although, you got to think he probably enjoyed some aspect of it, but it also made his job hard.
Yeah. And again, even with all the complicated things going on there, I was like, oh, this is kind of actually a hot Star Trek scene. I know we've had much hotter and whatever, but I was like, okay, where's this going to go? But like, part of me was like, "Don't stop this." It's like, oh no, I get where he's stopping it.
I'm with the way Bashir expresses himself that it's got to have the consent, and it did not seem like the consent situation.
Yeah.
Even though she was super willing, it wasn't her, and it was a betrayal of his friend to sleep with somebody wearing her form.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So Bashir blows Dax off here at Ops, and she just disappears, like Rumpelstiltskin can disappear and reappear. So that tells us there's something there too. Like that's like, oh, it's not just Rumpelstiltskin's magic because he's a magical being. They can all do that. We also get Birds and Snow and Odo. I mean, the whole Odo subplot was completely unnecessary, but so much fun. That was just fun. I enjoyed that very much. A Quark has 2 Bajoran women. Also did not age well. Were they Bajoran or human? It is interesting, though, that his ideal women were not Ferengi, that they were these aliens that he spends so much time with.
That is...
One of them, I think, was definitely Bajoran.
I don't remember, and I didn't want to back it up. But, yeah, the whole thing of him, like, even enjoying that so much that he doesn't even notice when he starts losing at first, when his tables start losing, that just felt slightly out of character for Quark, I think, maybe, or... gives us some new information about Quark we didn't necessarily know.
I get the people winning the game, and that's their fantasy, but what would an imagination, but what would be the dealer or Quark's? Well, Quark was the 2 ladies.
Quark was getting his imagination.
Yeah, but if you're the dealer there...
I mean, maybe the dealer was really... I mean, hates working for Quark because he's an awful boss, and so...
Yeah, I'll say this. I was a dealer at like one of the fundraising kind of casino night once. And it actually bothered me every time I was taking my friend's money, even though it's a good cause. So maybe that's kind of where they were coming from. Like, I get paid the same either way. And I feel like that's the way dealers are in Vegas. It's like, well, sorry, they actually do feel bad.
Well, there is an important detail, though, that would probably explain that. They established, especially with Rumpelstiltskin, that it didn't really matter what they wanted. It's what they started to imagine. So the dealer in this situation would probably get very afraid and it would sort of feed into what was happening. Because as soon as they see evidence of something start to happen, they believe it even harder, and then
that's an excellent point.
Yep.
Thank you.
Odo at one point says, "Ladies and gentlemen, and all androgynous creatures."
Yeah.
So the binary gender is officially dead in Star Trek, as it should be.
I wrote that down too. I was like, "That's great." Yeah.
Well, I don't think Odo's people really have genders. I mean, I know he exhibits as a male, and another changeling we'll get to know exhibits as a female, but I think, that's part of it.
When you can turn into a chair, what is gender at that point, especially?
Yep. Thank God. Finally, we're past the Star Trek dual gender stuff. The whole submissive versus old fish, though, that was uncomfortable. That was very uncomfortable for me. Where the younger Dax was calling her submissive, said the new Dax was submissive, and Dax 2 said she was an old fish.
Cold fish.
Cold fish.
Yes.
Same thing. It was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable, to say the least.
Okay, so I think at least one of Quark's ladies is... Well, she might not be Bajoran. She definitely has ridges on her nose, but I don't know if they're the same.
I forgot to mention, one of Quark's women was played by Kristen Bauer. You may know Kristen Bauer von Stratton. Does not look like she's credited on IMDb. I saw this on Memory Alpha last night when I watched it. I just happened to be looking at the Memory Alpha listing for this and saw Kristen Bauer's name in the credits and said, I know who Kristen Bauer is. She's best known for True Blood, 51st Dates, Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion, Nocturnal Animals. She has 81 credits. So she's like a known actress.
Is that the blonde or the brunette?
She was blonde.
Okay.
So, yeah, she wasn't super famous at this. She was in Seinfeld as Gillian. But this was, she was in Seinfeld before this. So she'd done some credits before this. But yeah, she was actually someone. A lot of times those are like extras. They're people that you don't know, you know? She will also guest star in an episode of Star Trek Enterprise as a lieutenant and an actual speaking character. It's not even listed on our IMDb page that she was in this episode. So, well, I guess her first credit's 1994, and this episode aired 1993. So this was before she has any credits in IMDb.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I could not find it. She is Man Hands on Seinfeld.
Oh, wow.
I enjoy her very much.
Yeah.
So I get excited. I thought she looked slightly familiar, but it wasn't until I saw her name on Memory Alpha that I'm like, oh, it's her. IMDb needs to fix this.
But I couldn't find anything on her.
IMDb needs to fix this here.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to submit the change.
Fix what?
That she's not listed for this episode.
Yeah. I thought the open was really long, which I actually enjoyed. Like, I guess we have some long. Not everything cuts right to the stinger, but
it felt like I felt like it had come up before in a different, like a shorter version of that scene in a previous episode. Actually, I was a little confused at first, but yeah.
The episode takes a turn when the three characters meet separately from any of our characters, because at this point we know there's something up. They're not just imaginings. There's something, So that was a little bit disturbing.
In a good way, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, it
raised the stakes for sure.
Yeah. But first of all, I found it more interesting when they established, as we said way back, that it wasn't they weren't holograms. I mean, they got that out of the way. That's something we would assume, obviously, as soon as it seemed like they might have some sort of sentience, or even perhaps sinister motives as well. At least they wanted to lean into making the audience believe that could be the case. That made it even more interesting.
Yeah. So they mentioned that they think the Vulcans encountered them like 200 years ago. So we're getting some backstory. I mean, obviously that's not something we'd seen in there before. In previous Star Trek, we hadn't seen this encounter. This was something they made up for this. But it ends up being a really cool part of the pattern. It's because they believed it was similar that it became similar, right?
Mm. Yeah.
I liked that. I mean, we haven't got to that part yet where they figure that out, but I liked that conceit that it was just taking what they are thinking and playing on it to the point where even the emergency that was destroying the station was just their imagination.
Yeah.
Kira sees fire while she's evacuating the pylons. We've talked a little bit about the structure DS9 and the blueprint, and I think there was some question about what the pylons were for, even though ships dock up there. So apparently there's usually personnel in the pylons, but they evacuated them. My guess would be not a lot, unless there's a ship dock there that they're servicing. But
and Keiko's finally back from Earth.
Finally, who cares?
Maybe these
returns.
Maybe this marriage can be saved.
Haiti returns as Molly. I will say, I did read also when I was looking at this episode that Hannah Haiti was so freaked out by the character playing the actor playing Rumpelstiltskin, that she refused to be alone in a room with him. They always had. That's probably why we never have a scene with just the two of them by themselves. Because she did not want to be. She was freaked out by the Rumpelstiltskin makeup because she was very young. Rumpelstiltskin was played by Michael J. Anderson, best known for Twin Peaks. He's the man in the suit and the talks backwards in the room.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's
Mulholland Drive, Carnival.
Right. Yeah, Carnival. That's what I was trying to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's got quite a few credits and also won the silver medal in for the International Film and Television Awards for a documentary he made called Little Mike. So yeah, he's 3'7" tall in real life, still alive as far as I can tell. And yeah, it's certainly somebody familiar that we've seen before. I guess if Warwick Davis isn't available, then you call him.
I'll say I had the same. I'm going back to last week. I had the same reaction to the appearance of Rumpelstiltskin as I did to the opening of last week's episode, which was, oh boy.
I hated Rumpelstiltskin. Period. Beginning to end.
I did.
I'm sorry, actor. Michael J. Anderson. I don't think it was his fault. I just hated it. Hated it so much.
I did not.
I understand the purpose, or as I pointed out, they needed to establish the different types of manifestations. So it wasn't purely sexual. It wasn't purely fantastical, ego, whatever, and could be fears, etc.
Sure, but I didn't like it at all. Jake tries to make excuses to the imaginary Ben Sisko. I guess Buck at some point leaves Ben and starts hanging out with Jake. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Oh, and then Odo imagines Quark in a cell, which at first I was like, did he actually transport the real Quark, or is it a fake Quark like Ben was a fake Ben Sisko? But I think he actually transported them because it's not the only example of the episode, because later Keiko and Molly are transported to Ops.
Right.
And they're real. So I think these aliens have the ability to transport.
Yeah.
But that does kind of ruin Quark's fantasies at that point, that now he's locked up.
I was pretty sure that was a Quark copy because of the way that he said. He said, "You put me here." It was like extending like the narrative that this Quark would have been aware of. The real Quark would have been like,
I took that Quark realized it was Odo's fantasy. I don't know, but I don't know.
That's possible too.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
But the Jake scene with Ben and what was the other? guys know the baseball player. Yeah, Ben and Buck. And in retrospect, that was a huge clue. We saw it was literally what Jake was considering as he was going through, like the angel and the devil there. Mm-hmm. It's what he was imagining just happening in real time, essentially. This is what my dad would say if I tried to do this, and he's kind of voicing his
right.
Yeah, I like that. I did think it was interesting when the tear was getting bad in space. We saw all three of our primary hallucinogens or whatever, the fake people, watching the faces of the people they were made for, watching the tear, which definitely establishes the connection between the two, although I thought it was pretty obvious from the beginning there was a connection between the two.
Yeah.
I thought that, well, in a way, I thought they were being mesmerized by the effect in space at first.
Oh, okay.
And I'm glad that wasn't it. It felt like they were trying to make, well, I don't know, trying to, but it felt like they were establishing that this was their plot all along. They wanted to entrench these people with this phenomenon in some way. But
no, that didn't end up being what it was.
Right.
But yeah, I get your point for sure. Mira in ops when things are going down, like says some technobabble. I don't remember what the exact line was, but it was some. And then she goes, and then asks, "What does that even mean?" Which I have to think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like maybe that was a Nana visitor improv. Like my character wouldn't know this, so I should add this to the end. Like I can read a panel, but I don't know what it means. Because her character's a liaison who was a freedom fighter. She would not be well versed. She knows some technology, but I don't think at this point, and I think she's learning quick, but I don't think at this point she would understand everything technical that goes on a space station.
Makes sense.
The Dax copy dies. Did not feel any emotion in that moment.
I was just like, what is going on here? Yeah, I thought she would disappear too.
Yeah. But then Rumpelstiltskin offers to save them in exchange for Molly. And O'Brien actually appears to consider it.
Yeah.
What does a magical creature need with drugs?
But
yes. Sorry.
No, I just the fact that O'Brien, I mean, I guess O'Brien at that point is like, well, to save all these lives, I have to. Right. No, he's his daughter. I feel like he should be very forcefully saying no, and then they'd have to talk him into it. Whereas he's like appears to be considering it, and then Cisco lets him off the hook by saying, "Don't answer that, Chief. Of course we're not doing that." I do love that it's Cisco that figures it all out. I like seeing the hero captain, imagining the rupture, just believe it, and getting those people to believe that it's not really there, and how that stops everything. I liked that a lot. And him saying no speculation, only facts from now on. Spock would not have had any issues with people appearing before him. He would have been able to figure it out quicker. Buck explains to Cisco that they're aliens studying them, and they don't understand imagination. I kind of felt like this should have just been the wormhole aliens, because they already don't understand linear time. It's conceivable they don't understand. They're right by the wormhole. I know they didn't make the connection, but considering that they never follow up on this, where he's like, maybe I'll explain it to you next year, which they should have done. I'm so disappointed that they never follow up on this cliffhanger. I think that's an element of this show finding its way in season 1 and not having the long-term plan, but by season 2, they're starting to develop that long-term plan. So they're ignoring the things they threw away in season 1.
True.
But man, I wish there had been some follow-up.
Well, first of all, it would have been funny if they did fully break the fourth wall and say something like, well, guess we'll see you next season, or something like that.
Sundays at 8. That would be a Boston Legal thing. That would be like Boston Legal would do that.
I love that too, of course. And the other thing, did they actually literally say outright that they were not the same aliens?
No, but I think it's pretty obvious they're not the same aliens, because he mentioned that he followed them through the wormhole. So I think that pretty much says they're not, because he followed them through the wormhole in space. You're observing people, and they saw the ship go through the wormhole and followed it.
Well, it's funny you say see you next season or whatever, Keith, because I think when Buck says maybe next year, he doesn't necessarily mean next solar year or whatever year DS9 would be. That's a common sports phrase.
Oh,
season. maybe next year or wait till next year.
Nice.
At the end of Bad News Bears, they say wait till next year. And as a Mets fan, I've been saying that for the last 36 years. So
I love that.
I think that's what he was actually saying and meaning, which may not mean next year, but doesn't take away that it's a bummer we don't see them again. But yeah, I think that's where they were going with that. Speaking of Buck, one more credit for Keon Young. I'm sure I'm butchering his name. I'm sorry. He's in Squid Game, so he's still got.
Who's he playing Squid Game?
I don't know, but I saw him with the Squid Game credit because I haven't watched that yet either.
Oh my God!
Squid Game's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's what I hear.
It's intense, but it's fantastic.
But yeah, I think he's in there. Yeah.
There is one lasting impact from this episode. Buck tosses Cisco the baseball at the end. I did not realize that is the same baseball that will sit on Cisco's desk for the next 7 seasons.
Oh, wow.
And appears with his figure and action figure and models and everything. Like, that is a iconic piece of Cisco, that baseball. And it won't just sit there. It will be referenced in dialogue and in plot points over and over again for the next 7 years.
And it'll jump around sometimes and,
Instead of Rumpelstiltskin, I would prefer Hermie Dale shows up. And I also would have preferred, and this is more an alternate title, Shore Leave 2, Shore Leave 3, Shore Leave 4. So I know it ended up deviating from that, but it's still it's definitely in the same ballpark to stay in the Buck-Buckeye milieu.
My alternate episode is the Triple X Porn's parody of this episode because I was surprised that nobody's done that because it was begging for it right there. Yeah. Not just the Dax thing, but the Quark thing, and everybody else could have had their own I mean, you can't tell me Jake and Nog weren't imagining attractive members of the opposite sex.
Well, all right. That brings up a question. I guess I'm not sure if I've ever really thought it through before. But are there things like that about specific episodes of Star Trek, or I guess there has to be some sort of like a holodeck conceit or something in one, right? I mean, what's the rule? The rule 30 something, or the porn rule?
Rule 42. Yeah. I think it's 42. Anyway, Who was your shady character this week?
It was going to be Bashir, but now after we've talked about it, that we decided, you know what? It's me. It's me for thinking that Bashir was thinking and talk, or that Dax 2 was actually did get involved, and Bashir got it on. So me, which is not the first time I've been shady, not the first time I've been the annoying one. But anyway, sorry.
I'm going with the aliens.
Yeah, that's fair. It's true.
They were shady.
Shady.
I'm going to say Rumpelstiltskin in particular.
Rumpelstiltskin in particular?
Yeah.
Okay. Why him in particular?
That whole thing about trying to make a deal and playing into the character to that extent was so strange. And I think that added to the annoyance factor. It was just...
Especially when he knew that he wasn't going to... that they weren't in real danger.
Right. Well, I don't know. I guess especially that. I suppose the whole thing... It's kind of funny that I'm surprised it didn't bother Steven, or at least I don't remember him mentioning it. I don't know if we could call these godlike beings necessarily, but they were definitely testing aliens. Yeah, as it turned out. Yeah, I guess I like the way that it came out and the reveal of it, and simply and it's more of like they were more observing, I suppose. Wait, did they establish whether or not the aliens were causing the phenomenon, or were they just?
I thought they said they were like more fascinated by it, like intrigued by it rather than
right.
Yeah, they were testing the imagination by making the imagination come to life.
Okay, that's what I was sure of.
Yeah.
Would it have actually destroyed the ship if were they going to just cut it off at a certain point? Because it seemed like
that was kind of up in the air, right?
Yeah. Well, so the baseball is still there. It's a corporeal object that they created. So that whatever that anomaly was should have been able to destroy the ship.
You're right. It should have, unless Buck replicated the baseball.
That would have been hilarious too. Actually, there's a cut scene where he's just actually walking in the porch and trying to order a baseball. So Cisco figured it out in time, obviously, and that's how he had the solution. I guess we don't know how far they were willing to go, or to let things go. Huh.
Yeah, I'd like to think that they seemed peaceful enough they wouldn't let them be destroyed. But
I feel like if someone had been killed, they wouldn't have shrugged their shoulders like Q has done.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
what can I do? Well, you're a godlike being. There should be something you can do.
Well, that's baseball.
I'm glad they didn't go there in this episode, though. I'm really glad they didn't go there and just let somebody die and at the back being like, "Oh, they're alive again."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
That would
That would have annoyed me.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the high selling point for me then was just the way that Buck sort of calmly explained what was just sort of like, that's what you imagined. Mm-hmm. That's it. Here's the explanation. This is why this happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Fun. Kinda.
Keith, for the episode you missed Progress, who was your shady?
Progress. Okay, so that was the
old guy.
Yeah, the old guy. That's the answer right there.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, it was mine too, I think.
Manipulation was just like, come on.
Moran. Yeah, he was mine. Stevens was actually Quark. So I don't remember why, but
Quark amused me in that one. I actually kind of liked him. The interplay with him and Nog.
What? Yeah, absolutely. Who was your annoyance this week?
Oh, mine's
Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah, me too. It's unanimous.
Okay, he was awful. Yeah. Keith, who was your annoyance and I'm sorry, Toran was not the old guy. Toran was the Toran was the administrator. He was the administrator.
The
Malabak was the old guy. Yes. Malabak was the old guy, so Keith went with Malabak for shady. Annoyance, Toran was my annoyance, and Malabak was Steven's annoyance. So
same, still Malabak. Yeah.
Okay, you guys.
No, I understand. I get your point. It's just the way it was presented. There was just such enough holes.
Who are you going to drink with this week?
As far as it used to. Since I'm the shady person, Bizarro Dax. I want to see if there is actually more to her, which I feel like there is because she gets competitive later. But
I'm having a drink with real Dax.
I was going to say something.
Whether she likes me or not, I want to be her friend, even if it doesn't go further than that. I just want to. I think she's cool, and just her attitude of the way she handled this just made me even more impressed as usual.
I can have a drink with regular Dax 1 next week. Dax 2 she's going to die soon.
Fair enough.
With her reckless lifestyle.
Huh. Probably Dax 1.
Dax 1. Okay. Who would you have a drink with last week for Progress?
Same, oddly enough. The
Dax?
Yeah, something about was that the one with the scene where she was talking to Kira about
sleeping, almost dating Morn?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Steven actually chose Malabak to have a drink with, and I went with No J Enterprises. Root beer.
Those are good choices too.
Ranking this episode, let's start with the storyteller. Since we're talking Rumpelstiltskin.
Wow.
I didn't like either episode, but which one was worse?
If we're going to put it this low, I would actually probably put it under storyteller. I
by this low, you mean storyteller is above the halfway mark?
Really?
Yeah.
I thought I remembered it being like, okay.
That's
Yeah, but I was going to say that I'm surprised you didn't like storyteller because it was like a really good O'Brien episode, and especially the whole thing with Bashir, and that was like I think a pretty large element of how that or what made that work.
Under storyteller, okay.
I would too.
Yeah, I mean the conclusion was interesting, but up until then it was rough. Number below that is Babel.
Above.
I think the conclusion's enough to have me agree with Keith, even though I didn't like a lot of the episode.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll put it number 6 of 14 or 15 then. 7 of 15. 7 of 15. So just above the halfway mark.
That's not bad. It's been such a long time since we've hit that one.
Oh, we actually haven't talked about writer and director. It was directed by Robert Legato, who's best known as a special effects guy. He only has 6 directing credits. He directed 2 episodes of Next Gen before this, Menage a Troy and The Nth Degree, and then this was basically his second directing credit. And his only DS9 directing credit. It was written by a story by Neil McHugh Cofford and William Cofford, and then teleplay by them with Michael Piller, who was the showrunner at this point. Both Nell and William. Well, Nell, this is Nell or Neil. Nell, this is their only IMDb credit. William actually has 2 other IMDb credits for writing. One before this, one after this. The one after this is a video game. So not well known. They must have just pitched this story. It was bought. Michael Piller helped them shape it, but they got teleplay by credit credit as well. So next week, back to the Enterprise D for Second Chances. Ooh, this I haven't seen this one either, but I know what this is. Riker's exact duplicate is discovered on Nivala 4. His first order of business, resume his relationship with Deanna. Second order, obey orders from the superior himself. So this is where Riker finds his transporter clone.
They say we've all got a double somewhere in the galaxy. That's what they always say. So.
Well, this I'm pretty sure this is the beginning of the episode, so I can tell you it was a transporter accident years ago that split him, and the double was left on this planet years ago, and then they find him.
Wait, so this is something that I kept wondering about that. I don't remember if I ever saw anything about this one, but it's been referenced obviously a number of times. So this isn't something that we have seen referenced at all before in the series. This is just something that's
not before.
All right.
But yeah,
that's what they say. We all have a transporter double somewhere in the galaxy.
It's almost like the enemy within, except Kirk is sort of like good and evil.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Is that what you're referencing, Stephen? I
was just referencing when people are like, well, we all have a double.
Oh, okay.
Brady Bunch, Peter Brady had a double.
And I don't want to say anything else about the plot until after we watch it, but I will say this guest star alert. Look for Dr. Mae Jemison, the astronaut, guest stars in this episode. As a Starfleet officer, not as herself.
Okay, so someone who was an astronaut in real life, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she was the first African-American woman to go into space, and it was a big deal that she guest starred.
Nice.
So, yeah. She plays Lieutenant Palmer. You'll see. Anyway, until then, live long.
You wish. Prosper.
And what does Rumpelstiltskin need with a spaceship?
Oh my God.
Sorry, a starship. Yay.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?